Hi everybody, my name is Liliia and I'm leading quality assurance in Kotlin ecosystem department. And today we're going to talk on how to leverage Kotlin specifics to have as many hours of debugging, painful debugging as possible, and then those beautiful aha moments. And also, how to enjoy luxury of the most painful updates as often as it possible. And of course, how to break our boring routine, because usually it's boring to just code, with sudden production incidents. And so far it sounds like a bit more abstract, so let me introduce someone who is living this in real life. Here is Kotlin, and I'm saying hello to all my French friends here. She's several years into Kotlin. She has switched from Java. She's incredibly enthusiastic about Kotlin, so she's really, really excited about it. And she has a very special talent. She always makes the worst choices possible. So now she got a new project. She's working on that. And let's go to this adventure with her. And it all begins with data classes. So Kotlin has a new application, and she begins with a user. And so far, she just got a couple of parameters here, name, age, and let's note that those parameters are mutable, which is kind of natural, right? We all are people. Sometimes we change names. More often we age, so it's fine. And then we have this function, which basically just updates the user, does some validation, and then it prints it. And here, Kotlin has used the destructuring, another cool feature of Kotlin. You have already seen it today at the keynote. She initialized the two parameters at once with the data class. Then some validation happens. It doesn't matter for the sake of this example. Then she updates the age, and then she noticed that something is wrong here. She is 100% sure about the validation and that it's right, but somehow this validation lets go through some invalid parameters. So she does the most popular thing to debug, with printlns. And here is what she got with the structured values she has initialized. Then she prints just a plain user, and here it is. The age in the second example is updated, but in the first, no, because the structured declarations are not being updated, even though the parameters are mutable. So here is the first lesson for us. We just use mutable parameters and destructuring. And on top of that, actually destructuring is cool even without mutable parameters, because imagine then Kotlin would need to add one more parameter to the user. It's also natural when you are developing your application. And then the call side, the destructuring initialization, will also break again. If you are on the boring side, here is a couple of tips for you. So first, it's better to use immutable properties, but we all sometimes need it like really, really badly to make it mutable, so then use it carefully. And here is another thing. Those mutable parameters affect not just the structuring, it also affects hash code and equals. So if you are working with such structures as hash map or hash set, be cautious as well. And we are moving forward. The next adventure is called Elvis operator. Who is aware of Elvis operator here? Well, pretty much everybody. I'll make just a quick tour here. So as many of the developers who have switched from Java to Kotlin, Kotlin is so excited about null safety in Kotlin. And when we read this documentation page about null safety, we also meet the Elvis operator. There, we explain that when working with nullable types, we want it to be safe. So if we have nullable type, then we may check that it's not nullable and initialize the corresponding parameter as either in the example b length or non-nullable value. Looks good, but it's a bit wordy. So we are rewriting this expression in a way, the more concise way, Kotlin way, using Elvis operator. Here it is. Also, we should notice that on the right hand of the Elvis operator, you may use return expression. Good. How do we use it? Here comes data validation. So continue this story with data class. We have now data validation, where we first initialize all the very plain things, all the regular ones, user context, database connection, and validation rules. And have you noticed here how beautifully now defensive this code is? And what is more beautiful are those return statements on the right hand of the Elvis. Now you would never know what exactly went wrong in your function. Maybe something was wrong with database. Maybe database connection. Maybe user was nullable. You would never know. And here is going validation with a clear error message, so you would definitely know what was wrong with your data. So it's no-brainer that at some point, Kotlin receives this bug report that nothing happening when I submit form from a user. And yeah, this is quite natural. It brings a lot of hours of debugging into your life because you wouldn't know where exactly something went wrong. And to be fair, Kotlin has learned from the best. And let's take a look at Kotlin repository. Here is a query code. You also have it at recording. Let's take a closer look. Here it is. We have the very same pattern here. Returning nulls on the right hand of Elvis without any error messages. Cool. And again, if you are a user for something more calm, here is a couple of advices. So first, logging exceptions and other error handling mechanisms are good for you. Those save your precious time and nerves. Also, it may be useful to instead prefer a library function require not now. Here is an example of how we could rewrite Kotlin's code to make it more readable, supportable, debuggable. And also design with intention. I have noted that that code was really now defensive. And that is a thing. Did Kotlin really need all those parameters to be nullable at that point? Maybe she could have designed this API in another way to be less nullable. Who knows? And now we are more or less done with the application part, and we are moving to the library side, working with APIs. And yeah, here is a really simple function processing values this time. So we have values, we have some predicate, and we are iterating through those values. If the predicate is true, then we are transforming the value in some way. Here is the transformation function. And the details of transformation are not important for this example as well. And yeah, that's it, pretty much. Then Kotlin noticed that here we have Lambda, and she has just learned that she could benefit from the runtime performance, gain from the runtime performance, if she inlines this function. So she adds this modifier here, and then, oh no, ID has highlighted it with red, and also compiler is complaining, because what? Because transform value function is still internal. And when we are inlining something, this internal function gets inlined too, therefore exposed, and probably that is not what you wanted. What should we do there? We still want to gain some performance, right? So Kotlin has chatted with ChatGPT. Here is a couple of advices she got. First, really straightforward. Let's remove internal modifier at all and write some scary documentation so no one ever use it. Right? We all read documentation, and if we see these kind of things, we never use internal functions. Sounds good. Then she has learned about this published API annotation, which we have in Kotlin. And she thought, well, it's more beautiful. And still, she has added some scary comment. But at least now, her function is still internal. So everyone would know that it's internal. You don't want to use it, right? And in this beautiful situation, now we have double trouble. Because if Kotlin wants to update anything in her internal function, she would still have to care about the backwards compatibility. She has exposed this API. And here is another Easter egg here. Remember, Kotlin has Java background. And here we have this return statement. This return statement is called non-local return in Kotlin, which means that it would return not from the cycle for each, it would return from the entire function, which in turn means that we wouldn't process the entire values list. Instead, we use stop on the first value corresponding to the predicate, and then exit, which is probably not what Kotlin wanted. So, again, if you didn't like probably this kind of interesting adventures, let's look into the boring side. First, actually using published API annotation is a good practice, and it's indeed more clear for both consumers and library authors and supporters. Also, of course, you should avoid calling internal things in inline functions, and generally supporting backwards compatibility with inline functions is more complicated for library authors. And yes, the Easter egg, be cautious about those non-local returns, because even seasoned Kotlin developers sometimes step into that. We JetBrains sometimes do. And the ultimate bore hack, I have to. Use explicit API mode. We have it in our Kotlin documentation. Here is another link to that. And it will really help you to write more concise and better supportable libraries. And we are almost good to go. Now we have application side, we have library side, so Kotlin wants to just build her application regularly. So when she develops her application further on, now we have a campaign project there, she decides to build it. And usually, here is a command she calls. For whatever reason, or for whenever she wants it, whenever she wants iOS artifact or Android artifact, she just calls Gradle build, which is natural. Then she waits a little bit more, a little bit more, and more. Well, because she has called the entire world to be built instead of just a simple artifact. Probably you are struggling with this too, so here is another QR code to our beautiful documentation. I wasn't paid for that, but we do have a good documentation. And well, it's not about Kotlin anymore, so you have other ways to entertain yourself at the job than Gradle, than Kotlin as well. And here we are good to go. just a quick wrap-up. So today we have learned that it's a good idea to prefer immutability in data classes. Also, it's even better than Elvis is even better with explicit error messages. And idiomatic Kotlin might be good, cool, and concise, but please enjoy responsibly. And the ultimate bore, we actually have the libraries, authors, guidelines. Those are really cool and well thought, so please pay attention if you are writing libraries. And that's it. Thank you, and have a nice Kotlin.